Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Living Mythology, I'm proud to bring you Sword and Sandal Cinema. Our first guest is Ron Carson, who will bring us to the tales of Troy, which are told in modern times. Greetings, Ron. How are you?
Good evening, Sandal. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Just finished some of my workout. I have another workout planned for after I stop speaking today, so I'm pretty hyped.
Well, that's good. Well, this particular picture that we're showing in the sultry Coliseum features one of your idols, the late great Steve Reeves, whose memory remains eternal and everlasting.
That's good. Looking forward to hearing about it. And I'm sure as you I'll remember watching it at some point.
I think I do remember us watching it to begin with back in our old days, So we're going to preview the Trojan horse today.
Great.
As a matter of fact. Now, in Italian, it's La Guerra di Troia. And this picture pretty much is set in the 10th and final year of the Trojan War. And Steve Reeves is the star of this show, as he is the hero, the protagonist, I should say, Aeneas. And Edie Vessel is Helen. John Drew Barrymore was Odysseus. And Juliet Menil is Crusa. So some interesting footnotes on this picture, as he kind of gets away from the Hercules stereotype in this particular movie. And the director was Giorgio Ferroni. And I do remember we did see this picture together when we were kids. So what are your thoughts on this Trojan horse movie?
Well, I remember watching it, and I remember Steve Reeves being in it. I'm a fan mostly of the mythology before the Trojan War, but it was I don't remember very much about it. It's been many years since I last saw it, so I'm looking forward to your descriptions to conjure up images from my past imagination.
Well, the Venice International Film Festival pretty much restored this motion picture, and it was known as Storia Segreta del Cinema. As I'm trying to brush myself up on the Italian aspect of the way this movie was released, which actually was actually recorded in Italy and France, and a lot of the battle scenes were shot in the former Yugoslavia. And the picture was distributed by Variety Distribution, and ironically, it was released in Italy back in 1961 upon completion, but it didn't make it to the States until the following summer in July of 1962. So usually that's the case when it's a European picture. It'll probably, it was released first in Europe, and then later on made its way overseas to the United States. And a lot of people are pretty much watching this in a very, very humid night today at the Coliseum, and we pretty much like doing this particular movie because it's still the genre of the sword and sandal, and they called it a surging spectacle of savagery and sex. So
early 60s must have been.
I'm sorry?
For the early 60s, it might have been risque, but certainly not by today's standards.
Not at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, they kind of like had a extra element in regard to the Trojan horse here, and it's sort of, it was like a different project for Steve Reeves. I mean, being that he was so used to being, Hercules, your genre in regard to that, and I would say that it's easily to the point where it.
From Lemnos, Troy,
Yes, go ahead. I'll welcome your 2 cents on this, Cos.
on Lemnos, you could see Troy, and it's only
Mm-hmm.
kilometers away across
Yep.
in the Upper Aegean, and when the sun used to hit the marble from Troy and its walls, it shone like a second sun, which is where Troy gets the name Ilium or Ilion, which means the sun. And Lemnos
Mm-hmm.
was a trading post for the Trojans and the Greeks, where they can come.
Yeah.
It wasn't that far away. And what a lot of people don't realize is even though the stories say that the Greeks remained there for 10 whole years and they didn't go back to Greece, Greece was not that far away. It's like it was in New Jersey and um, Troy was
Mm-hmm.
York. So it wasn't very far away at all. So there was a lot of going back and forth. There was a lot of commerce going back and forth. And one of the small islands, I think it was called Kokonitsi, I'm not positive, where
Yes, I've heard of Kokonitsi,
where Thealexandra used to have her ambella and stuff like that, where we used to go as kids, and the Gadar. Um, that was the trading post, right in Kokonitsi. They found lots of
Yeah, that was the little island as you were going towards Romanu,
yes, yes. New
They
Muderos.
called it Kokonitsi, yes. So our family does have a little bit of history regarding this,
Oh, sure.
And as you know, go ahead.
No, I said, oh, sure. We have a long history with Troy and the Greek myths. Lemnos is the island where Jason and the Argonauts landed, where the Amazon women were. Hercules appeared there first
Mm-hmm.
when he rose to Olympus to get his bow from Philoctetes to give to Odysseus so that the Greeks can win the Trojan War. Hephaestus fell from the heavens near Lemnos,
Mm-hmm.
the mermaids that lived nearby, and then he established the town of Hephaestion. And one of his workshops was in the volcanoes that were active on Lemnos at the time. And some say that Prometheus stole the sacred fire that he gave to mankind from Hephaestus's forge on Lemnos. Lemnos has a long
Right.
history in mythology as well as in regular human history.
Well, my mother's name was Helen, if you remember,
Of
of
course,
course. And your aunt was deemed as Helen of Troy from our Aunt Poppy's other half, Theocosta Karagiannis, used to always call her Eleni of Troy,
so that
So
tradition,
plenty of,
mythic
go ahead.
on.
I couldn't hear you, cuz.
Mythic tradition lives on to modern times.
Absolutely, absolutely, in more ways than one. Now, I'm pretty sure you have this in your collection somewhere.
I'm sure I do too. I have a whole shelf of things on the Trojan War books,
Mm-hmm.
comic books. Anybody who told the story of the Trojan War, if I come across it, it winds up in my collection. I have shelves on the Argonauts. The Argonauts actually have almost a whole bookshelf on just the Argonauts alone. I have a whole bookshelf
Mm-hmm.
of Hercules, lots and lots of Greek books. I've been giving my duplicates away to like local schools recently.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, and kids who play interactive storytelling games set in ancient Greece. I've been giving them away there too.
Well, if you have an extra copy of this movie, I would like very much if I can, include it in my collection. So,
Next time I look at the Troy shelf, I will seek to see if I can find one.
all right. Well, there are, other people that we want to give credit to in this movie, including Lydia Alfonsi, who played Cassandra. Warner Bentivegna was Paris. Luciana Angiolillo Andromachi. Arturo Dominici was wonderfully played as Achilles. Mimo Palmara, Ajax. Agamemnon was Nerio Bernardi. Nando Tamberlani portrayed Menelaus in a very good way. Carlo Tamberlani was Priam, or Priamos,
Uh-huh.
and Giovanni Cien Priglia was Diomedes. So there was quite a big Italian supporting cast in this particular motion picture. So,
Now, a lot of the were
go ahead.
a lot of the Peplum films we have were Italian productions, filmed mostly on location. So you had the ruins and the Egypt
Mm-hmm.
and uh, all the locations from the actual myths and histories and legends. And that added a lot to the value of the films or the experience of watching the films. And it did take
Absolutely.
for them to get to America. Even Hercules, which made Steve Reeves's fame in cinema and which pretty much launched the Peplum field, that was actually filmed in, I believe, 1957. It didn't come out in the United States till 1959.
Right. That's definitely something that we, looked into. That even though Steve Reeves' famous role was that of Hercules, he did try to branch out so he wouldn't be stereotyped.
Right.
Hence the reason why he did this movie as Aeneas. So,
And
but
contracted to do three films. She only did two. The third film never happened, but what did happen was a television production on Hercules, where he went to
hmm
with Ulysses and some other characters. And Steve Reeves was supposed to play that, but he and Levine could not come to agreement for a contract. So someone else was chosen,
hmm
Hercules, and they had the ship, the Olympia, which took them off to new adventures.
Olympia, that was the cruise ship that brought people from our native land to New York. I remember, because my mother took that boat
So the
after she got married to my father. Yeah,
mythic tradition lives on, and your mother took a boat named after Hercules's boat in the Peplums, and also it's a town where the Olympic Games took place in Olympia.
that is correct. That is correct. So there's a lot of parallels between, that and our family. You know what I mean? So that's what made it very important, so to speak. So,
Yeah, most certainly.
but go ahead.
And the mythic tradition lives on, and we were born into a time where there is cinema, and there are
hmm
TVs, and there were VHSs, and there are Blu-rays and 4Ks and all sorts of things, digital video. So these tales once told that used to be hard to find are never easy. You find them streaming for free at
hmm
different places.
Oh, 100% right on that one. Totally. And it's amazing how the situation where both our mothers had to transport themselves to the United States by boat, if you remember, because I'm sure your mom did the same thing. So,
Yes, she did. I don't remember the details of those stories, but I can easily get them.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. So I would safely say that the audience is having a good time watching this movie in the Coliseum. We are providing them with free water so they can stay hydrated and cool off in more ways than one, you know?
That's a very good
So,
thing, and you're a good host. And I'm sorry that you have no more time. It's already quarter after, and I'd like people to be able to follow you in your current adventures, not just
sure.
memories of past adventures. Where can they find you and start listening to your work beyond the Coliseum?
Well, first of all, they can easily friend me on Facebook. I'm also able to be friended on LinkedIn. I'm not doing Instagram because that's just pictures. But the reason why I actually wanted to spotlight this movie is because of our parallels to the family, you know, in more ways than one. So I can easily say that we're plus, you know, like I said, the parallels that I have here on this are very reminiscent because of the fact that our moms definitely lived through this, you know, in more ways than one. So,
Yep.
but that, go ahead.
No, it's very exciting. I remember last time I was in Lemnos, which was decades ago at this particular point in time, uh, walking around and trying to visit the sites where these tales took place,
I
and
think I joined you in one of those walks, if you remember.
many of them, yes, in the past, and going to Polyochny uh, and seeing the seven cities one on top of the other. Limnos has one too, just like Troy, cities on top of cities that go back into the Stone Age, and real
Mm-hmm.
civilizations there. We don't even remember their names, but their tales and some of the personages live on in our myths and legends, and going into the sea by where the ruins are and seeing that at one point what's underwater was above water because there are columns and pieces of
Mm-hmm.
and there too. Some people say that the legendary Chryssi, which is a lost island, was on Limnos in what they call now the Vuliakmena, the sunken lands. So
Sure, sure.
interesting. And in Limnos, they used to have the Samothracian mysteries, as well as in Samothraki. And
Yes,
people who wanted to go to the museum
yes.
would come to Samothraki, and they would undergo the rituals. They would be initiated into the mysteries.
Well, listen, let me let you go so you can make way for Brian. I mean, always a great show when he talks about some movies in his drive-in. I mean, him and I have that same premise, you know. We like showing our movies at vintage venues, and the Coliseum is very, very instrumental in getting our message across. And it looks like the folks are having a wonderful time watching this particular, you know, installment of Steve Reeves, sans Hercules. But thank you very much for, you know, bringing me back here as we're on track again and on this, you know, fourth Tuesday of the month. And I look forward to doing this again, Xadelfe.
Okay, Xalfas Agapo, thank you for coming back on. I wish you success in all your recent and upcoming endeavors, and we will talk again very soon. Take care.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, like I said, by all means, let's get Brian on with the drive-in, and we'll, you know, talk before the next appearance, which is on the fourth Tuesday of every month. Love you, Xadelfe.
Love you too. Be well, my friend. Take care.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye. And next we have the one, the only, the inestimable Brian Walker and his drive-in theater. Greetings, Brian. How are you?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm between exercise sessions. So,
Very good. I'm having a little trouble with my background, so I'm a little distracted right now. That's worse. Okay. Not sure what's going on there. Let's see.
the background's disappeared and we have the green screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to pick there. I had to pick a new you have to choose a color within the green screen, or else you get a lot of shadowing. Now my hair is washing out, but I think I can probably handle that with a little bit more light. Oh, that's too much light. Wait a minute. I'll just look bald. Oh, well, how are you tonight, Hercules?
I'm doing very well. I'm feeling in a mood to reminisce about cinema, and so I'm
Very
glad
good.
you're here. And you always have phenomenal things to share. So, looking forward to getting entertained and informed and amused.
Well, great. Actually, I believe possibly this Friday, I think we are going to hit our first drive-in of the season at the Brownsville Drive-In in Brownsville, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
Um, well, there are two movies on, and we saw one of them last night. I wouldn't mind seeing it again. It's 28 years later. Uh, we we watched it just last night at the theater. In order to prepare for it, we watched the original 28 Days Later, which came out, I think, around 2002. And going to see the movie, I was a little surprised. The two movies seemingly have very little to do with one another. The first one's a lot like Last Man on Earth,
Mhm.
um, a lot like it, as a matter of fact. It's got some Dan the Triffids thrown into it as well. And the third one is much more of a character study. It's very well done. It's very extremely well acted, well paced, written very well. It's just not the same. I guess I wanted to see more of a body pile or something. But I think we are going to hit the drive-in this weekend. If the heat backs off, I mean, this heat is, oh God.
Unbelievable.
If it's this hot, I'm not going to the drive-in. I'll promise you that. I think it is supposed to cool down a little bit into the weekend, and I think today was the hottest of the days. But in thinking about going to the drive-in, and I guess in honor of it, I wanted to talk a little bit, since this is Sword and Sandal Cinema. I wanted to talk about Peplum films, but I also wanted to talk about them in relation to where they fit into cinema in general.
Okay.
As
Sounds-
you know, I'm a big Italian film fan. Uh, I like French films too. German films can be pretty good, but I got to honestly, if I hear that a film is Italian, I'm probably more likely to watch it than any of the others. By nature, their films have to be done on a budget, so they're very inventive because they have to have some thrift to it. That's just the way their cinema is tilted. They didn't make horribly expensive movies. They made, well, essentially B movies, to tell you the truth. But that forces you to be inventive. You have to
Right.
be really creative, and you also have to have an eye on the future. Um, and if you think about the various film genre that Italy has given us, I mean, peplums, Eurospy, and golly, spaghetti westerns, which were hugely popular when I was a kid. I can't tell you how many of those we saw at the drive-in. As a child growing up. The spaghetti westerns were still popular into the early 70s, and ridiculously violent, which I guess I cut my teeth on those. But when it comes to peplum, although we tend to see peplum as as a genre of a limited period, and I think generally it's considered 1958 to 1965. I think it's had really long-reaching effects. I mean, I know you're a big fan of it, but you also like DC films, superhero movies, and the like. And there is a very clear, just connecting the dots, a relationship between Peplum films and the films that you and a lot of other people like to see today. I mean, brand new movies, and I think you can. It's been nearly 70 years since Steve Reeves' original film Hercules came out, but you can still feel it. It still has an effect, and I think that's remarkable because there again, these were low budget movies made for an international audience. A lot of children went to see it. It wasn't necessarily a children's movie or a children's genre, but a lot of kids, a lot of children were enamored of these films. I mean, I think you and I both,
Yeah.
uh, as children, saw them and became kind of drawn to them, which I think is remarkable for a genre that's by and large kind of violent. you know Hercules always has his labors, and they usually involve you know well, for lack of a better word, Herculean feats, um and with that, there's going to be some sort of conflict, some sort of violence, and you still see that in the films that you love today.
Yes, very much. And these films, the superhero films, are modern mythology, and books have
Yep.
been written. I have shelves and shelves and shelves of books that have compared ancient and modern mythology. And our mythology is a living thing, and it exists in our pop culture and our collective imagination. And not only are a lot of the superheroes based on mythical and legendary figures, but they've also adopted the actual mythical legendary figures and brought them to life in the here and now.
And if you look at the history of, I mean, the one I know best, which is American cinema, and one just, American culture in the 1930s, the Great Depression, and any children growing up in it, that could not have been an easy life. I mean, uh, growing up today, I would say has its challenges, but the 1930s must have been pretty rough for most kids. Always doing without, never having, they're never seemingly enough, around. And I mean that for most kids. I mean, even the ones that didn't necessarily have to miss a meal or something like that. It was a very difficult time, and I think that kind of created a yearning when it came to entertainment. Um, and just thinking about the heat today, indoor theaters in the 1920s were among the first large buildings to be air conditioned at great cost. Back then, I think the first air conditioned theater was 1926,
Wow.
and the cooling unit I think it cost about $100,000 in total to install into this theater, which was huge money 100 years ago. I mean, that's probably more like a few million. Now, $100,000 was the moon. Back then, and the systems were crude, and used a lot of power, but they also worked and it attracted people to the theaters. So in the 1930s, to not only escape the heat, but to escape kind of grim realities, I think a lot of kids, if they could, went to the theater, and there were so many more theaters back then than we have now. We have a tiny fraction of of theaters that are still open, drive-in or otherwise, than we had in the 1930s.
When I
You know,
was for one, two, three theaters within short walking distance, and another two which were like a few more blocks of walking. Now,
mhm.
I don't know where the nearest town is with a movie theater. They finally tore down the entire building, which was our theater for as long as I can remember.
That's a shame. Um, well, I mean, even here, I mean, we're in a medium-sized college town. We have essentially one theater. It's an AMC, and they have, I don't know, like 15 screens or something. I don't know how many screens it's got. At least 12, I would say. But that's our only theater. That's it. And that's at a mall that's about half dead. So who knows how long that AMC is going to hang on. Well, that's nice, a nice and depressing segue. I read an article, a couple of days ago about how much longer theaters have left, in terms of being open, and the figure that I saw was about 20 years. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. I think there is a lot to still be said for the experience of going to a theater, whether it's a drive-in or otherwise. But often over the last 10 years, you and I have talked about the drive-ins being endangered, and now it's just movie theaters in general, just are, I hope this doesn't happen, but it isn't going to happen, but they might become a relic of the past. Kind of hate to see that.
I hate to see that too. And unfortunately, we had the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns, and that
Yeah.
affected theaters, and that also led to the exploring the option of streaming and
Hmm.
streaming and simultaneous streaming. And I think that the availability of these films for home viewing during that time, made a lot of people ask, why should I go to the movies and spend all this money and then you got to go out and eat dinner or lunch or something? When it's cheaper to just get it at home and watch it at home when it comes out or shortly after it comes out.
Yeah, and I think COVID um, kind of fed into some people's, oh, not introversion, but just lack of wanting to get out and meet other people. And I think that's a bad thing ultimately. I don't want to sit at home for days on end again like we did at the early days of COVID. I like going out to dinner and then going to a movie. And the way we do it, it's kind of a communal thing. We will meet a couple of friends out for dinner, and then all of us will then go on to the theater. And it's a way of socializing, Um, and I think that's unfortunately, I think that's becoming a thing of the past too. Uh,
I'm
it,
looking forward to Superman and Fantastic Four. Those are the two I'm looking forward to. I don't know if I'll see both of them in the theater, but at least
Mhm.
one of those two I'll see in the theater.
For me, I'm probably leaning towards Superman between the two of those. That's probably the one and mostly what I see are horror films. But this summer, actually not even this summer. I mean, for the last year or so, there's seemingly been a horror film in release every week that I have. No, I'm serious. I've either gone to see or I'm I'm trying to see anyway. I haven't missed very many of them, and I've been kind of impressed. Going back to what I was talking about, and I know that segue was my fault. Um, with the Peplum films, giving us sort of a greater than human archetype to look at. Hercules isn't a god, but there's more to him than just mere mortal. And that's that in combination with the rise of superheroes and comic books in the 1930s and 1940s, I think has come together and formed a lot of the Marvel and DC films that we have today. I mean, it's been a long process. I would say overall, if you start with the serials in the 30s on today, about 90 years. But I'm just constantly amazed at the influence that is still going on with those types of films. And I do think that I don't think that films will die, even if the cinema does. I think they'll just morph into something else. Television is in the middle of transforming itself, or has been for the last 20 years or so. And I think cinema is probably going to have to do it too, just to stay alive. But I also think it will adapt, pretty easily.
The Hercules was in antiquity a sun god. He was my name actually, Hercules Invictus. It's Hercules' soul Invictus, which is the invincible sun. And he wore a lion skin, and the lion is a symbol of the sun, the constellation Leo. And he had the 12 labors, which were the 12 signs of the zodiac. So it was the sun moving through the zodiac. And the Hercules film, one of the movies, one of the graphic novels that the movie is honoring are based on the 12 labors of Superman. So the sun in his many forms keeps appearing in our popular culture. And again, Superman is a strong man. Hercules was a strong man. They protect civilization against monsters and so forth. So it's an ancient tradition and retold in modern times. And he became a god in Greek mythology and in Roman mythology. And in the first Herculean Peplum film with Steve Reeves, he told the Oracle that he wanted what humans wanted. He wanted to marry, to have children, to have a place in society. And in the one of the latest Hercules films with The Rock, he basically stated the same thing, that all he wanted was to live a normal life with a wife, with children, and so forth, and it was denied him. So Hercules, like Superman and a lot of other heroes, valued what it is to be human. So even though he was a god and of divine descent or outer space descent or whatever, he recognized the value of our humanity. And that's something as humans we don't always remember.
We don't seem to be remembering it much at all anymore, quite honestly. There's a I realize that with instant access to news and information, that that can sometimes make things seem worse. But golly, right now this is ugly. I mean, worldwide, this is not a great time to be in at the moment. I think things will change for the better before too long. However,
Optimus too.
yeah, you have to be, don't you?
Yeah, you have to be, especially when you're getting information, then you're told the information's made up, and then no, the information isn't made up. And
I gotta tell, I don't. This is terrible, and I know this is off topic, but I don't believe anything.
nor do I.
I mean, even information that I like, is it true? Hell, I don't know, and then I end up not believing it.
Honestly, I don't believe anything I hear, and when it's repeating because of all the focus on narratives and competing narratives and the value of and the abuse of narratives. It's all like stories that people are telling. So there are official stories and there are unofficial stories and there are conspiracy theories and there's all sorts of information. But how you connect the dots and make sense of it, I don't trust any interpretation. So it's like I don't know.
Well, and you cannot trust anything in the media at all. Period. You just can't. I don't care which media it is. You can't trust any of it. You have to, if you can do your own research yourself, terrific. But as you know, that takes time
That takes time, and then how do you
and
know
diligence. Yeah.
stability of the information you're building your foundation on? You really don't.
No, it's terrible. We really do need a superhero to come in and clean up all this stuff. And I think that really, you having an archetype like that, I think you played such a role in the development of children, since the 1930s, and it still is. Um, and World War II, I think, really underscored, the desire to have this, you know, being that was somehow, more than mortal, but not quite a deity, to come in and kind of be the champion for everything good, and to do things that mere mortals couldn't.
Oh yeah, the need for that was very strong, and the early superheroes they came out swinging. Superman in his earliest appearances, both on the radio and in comics, took on the Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan.
Mhm. And I mean, it has to be rooted in the period during which that it's made. And some forms of entertainment don't hold up as well as others. Comedy's especially brittle, I think. What's funny 50 years ago might be funny now, but not necessarily. Um, but this is something that just seems to be, it seems to be continuing on a trajectory. Um, and there's a lot of appeal to these films as well. The superhero films now, the Peplum films from the past, are beautiful spectacles. I mean, what you see on screen is gorgeous or stunning. It certainly, the visual that takes you back. And you also get to see some feats of strength, in a lot of them. And the spectacle of the costumes. It's interesting to see the costumes in DC and Marvel films today. And if you look back at the Peplum films, I mean, the detail on the clothing that the actors all wore, from Steve Reeves' Peplums, his Peplum, the one he was wearing, onto even the extras, and as many of them as there were in some of these sword and sandal films. I mean, some of them are just packed with extras. The extras are expensive too. That's pricey, to have that many people on a set and not blow a take, or something like that. And the costumes add to the visual kind of splendor, of watching film. And it's immersive as well. You have more buy-in, especially if the costumes are well done and look like what you think they would look like for that particular time period. A lot of for example, a lot of my favorite sci-fi films are in the 60s, and they all look like they're from the 60s, even though they're supposed to be in the future.
The retro sci-fi.
Yeah.
In fact, I've been playing with the retro sci-fi idea for a while, and we've had conversations, and occasionally we do a special episode. But at one point, we were supposed to be on cable television until, again, the pandemic happened. That whole thing fell through. The whole thing was going to be framed in retro sci-fi images and happening. So maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't. But I love that era of visual storytelling.
I do too, and that sort of grew out of mid-century modern, at least the look of it. Everything's very streamlined. Everything's stylish. Even the costumes are designed just so, and fitted to the actors themselves, and very very self-consciously of their particular time period, with women in space with bouffant hairdos, and such.
Shower curtains and pythons representing the height of technology. It's great.
And to see them like smoking on the rockets and things like that is always kind of fun too. They have all the trappings of
and rants about their little minds when talking about humans, like Plan 9.
Well, for Plan 9, there was the idea that these beings were superior to us. Much in the same way that the son of Zeus is probably superior to us as well. So yeah, there is a connection there as well. You can see a lot of that in sci-fi.
Yes, there's a lot of connection with through the UFO mythologies that we have now. And I've been doing a series of shows, and I wrote about it a bunch of times, that the old stellar mythologies, the mythologies of the planets and the stars, a lot of the elements that we have in sci-fi that are like buried deep in there, and also in the UFO culture, are actually very ancient. And they're right there. If you are familiar with what was written in antiquity, you can see that none of this stuff is new. These are ancient traditions that people are acting on now, thinking they're coming from sources that have never spoken before. But these sources have been speaking since the dawn of time and pretty much saying the same type of things. John Keel said it's like almost like you tap into the state of mind that's like a broken phonograph, giving the same message over and over and over again, because these voices from space and the forms that they take are archetypal and again, they're repetitive. They've been saying the same thing since antiquity. So I find that phenomenally fascinating. I don't know what it tells us about the human condition, but it's comforting to know that something is talking to us and appearing in semi-familiar guises since we came here to this planet and we've represented them in art, literature, and so forth.
And you're right. I mean, that is, from antiquity forward, and it's something that really hasn't changed. It just hasn't. And I think, a lot of it's just, fear of the unknown. I think, anyway. And we want to have an explanation for the things around us that we can't comprehend, or we can't really understand how they began. Like, why are we sitting on, the third planet away from the sun? Why are there planets? There's so many things that we just don't quite grasp. And we
There,
always look for an explanation for it. And if it's, creating a god for, sunlight or something like that, well, then so be it.
yeah, definitely. And the images keep repeating, like Ron was talking about the Trojan horse with Steve Reeves. That was the movie he was talking about. Uh,
Hmm.
I know I have somewhere in my collection of movies a cartoon on Ulysses or Odysseus, as the Greeks call him, traveling through space and his adventures like space adventures. And I just got a copy of a graphic novel where the same premise, basically, and it mixes images from the Trojan War and the Odyssey into like an outer space adventure. So these stories, live on and they're being told in new ways. I've seen futuristic novels where these are told. They're told in comic books, but in a superhero way rather than an ancient Greco-Roman way. So it's really, really fascinating. And tying it in with the stories that we were talking about with the news and narratives, we live stories, and it's both phenomenally fascinating and phenomenally frightening that we buy into stories and then we live them and relive them constantly.
Uh, I couldn't agree more, actually. And we don't always have a firm basis for which to plant all of that, but it is sort of how we live our lives and how we see ourselves too. I mean, a lot of how we see ourselves is reflected in the cinema we watch.
Yes, definitely.
And oftentimes, when you're watching a film, you put yourself in the place of one of the characters who appeals to you most. It doesn't necessarily have to be the protagonist, although I think with a lot of films, that's the general idea. I think sometimes you can also identify, or maybe even appreciate the antagonist in the film.
Yeah, definitely. People identify with these characters and they put themselves in the character and experience the film or the book or the comic or the graphic novel or the play or the real life drama, you know, by the roles that they put themselves in. And um, people are stuck in a story. You could see it because they have the same thing happen to them over and over and over again in life. And it seems like they expertly cast the characters in whatever scenario they're acting out. And they just act it out time and again.
Yeah, and you do wish some people would evolve, maybe write another act to play. But you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people do just sort of spin their wheels, or want the same message over and over again.
And the movies give you an opportunity to uh, like see this and to be able to let go of it sometimes and find a better story. And that's within our power as well.
And as I said when we first started talking, the movie that I saw last night, uh, eh, not the movie that I saw last night, the original version of 28 Days Later. That's what I should have said. Anyway, as I was watching it, I was just amazed that it's an apocalyptic film, obviously. Lots of those that I've seen during my lifetime. Those really started out in the, I guess, the 50s, 60s. And that genre is as strong as ever. Sometimes it's cast as a sci-fi film, sometimes it's cast as a horror film. But what happens when the world ends. That's it's almost its own film genre. Right now. There's been so many of them, and as I was watching the original 28 Days Later, it just all of these different films kept popping up. And I'm not sure that the filmmakers, what's his name, Danny Boyle, I think it's his name. I'm not sure that he consciously did that. I don't know if he consciously drew certain elements from specific films, but in my head, I was just seeing, 6, 7, or 8 different films that really went into that first, movie.
Some movie makers do that. I remember reading that the movie makers who did Independence Day actually watched like tons of films and drew out bits and pieces of the films that they liked and put it into their movie. And on a lower budget scale, The Evil Dead did that too with possession films. They sat and watched every single possession film in existence, and it's like, ooh, I like that. Ooh, I like that. Ooh, I like that. How can I put it in there and do it a bit better? And they used the images from other movies and situations from other movies. And it's even politely called doing homage or giving homage.
Paying homage.
Okay.
And it is. And I do appreciate it when you do see, layers of essentially research. Whenever you do see images from different films popping up into, one finished product, it can be impressive to know that, the director, had a certain vision and he actually did his research on it. He actually went back and looked at, some of the past works. I find that some people just want to like cut to the chase and they don't want to do their research. They don't want to learn the history of it. And in that case, I don't think that the work at hand, or the work of art at hand, I guess I should say, always comes off as well. I do think you need to go back and go back to the very beginning and learn where all of this comes from.
A lot of people put Easter eggs in their work, as they're called, and is a delight for people like us who like finding the sources and so forth. My wife and I have been binge watching the show Supernatural again. It ran for 15 seasons,
Mm-hmm.
and an animated version of it for a couple of seasons, or one season I remember as well. And we recognize things, and then they'll put a sentence from that television show or movie in the episode. So, you know that that's where they got it from, or that's what inspired them to put it in here. And
Go ahead.
then they'll deliberately do something like they did crossovers with Scooby-Doo and several other films or television shows, and they make sure that they make their fans happy by having like supernatural conventions and things like that inside the show. Or what if they went to another dimension where their lives are a television show? They did that, and that's always delightful.
And we just finished 3 seasons of The White Lotus on HBO Max, which I loved. And those are actually, gosh, without a spoiler, in a sense, it's sort of each season is how a murder unravels, how a murder takes place. Maybe I should say, and it could be murderers, but and watching that, and having seen a lot of film noir, crime dramas, it's kind of interesting to see the visual clues that the filmmaker gives you, so that you can attempt to figure out what's going to happen at the very end.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I haven't caught that yet, but you've mentioned it a few times, so I'm curious about it.
I've loved it. I think it's really good. Um, and we started the first season of Hacks, as well, which is also on HBO Max. It's a it's a little bit of everything. I kind of hate to peg it in one particular genre. I mean, a lot of it's funny. I mean, some of the lines are laugh out loud funny. But there's some pathos to it as well. There's some drama, and it's very well done. Um, and just to give you the premise of the series, Jean Smart plays I want to say Joan Rivers type comedian, getting toward the end of her career. And a lot of it smacks of Joan Rivers because she has a residency in Vegas, and she's always flying to the East Coast because she has QVC shows to do where she hawks merchandise.
Hmm.
And the character herself is just a train wreck. I mean, she's probably an alcoholic, um, knows what she's doing, and doesn't seem to care that it's not always that great. Her comedy is as this character's name is Deborah Vance. The comedy is aimed at kind of an older audience that it might be challenged by some new things. So her material is kind of old, stuff that you would have heard on the Tonight Show back in the 70s. It's that old. And she's successful with it. She has a lot of people coming to see her, but it's an older crowd. And she reluctantly hires this young woman who has been a writer, but didn't have a whole lot of success with it. And they're both hacks, in it really. Gene Smart is like I said, this kind of old school comedian, stand-up comedian, kind of coarse, but and like I said, the material is really stale. I think it's intentional. It's written that way for the script. And the assistant that she hires to help her write material is very much a millennial. Doesn't really understand punchlines very well, and they're just from two different worlds. I mean, their comedy doesn't mesh very well, but they're very similar in that their comedy is for a very specific audience, if that makes any sense. A very specific graphic, I guess I should say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. A lot of the comedy of long ago, things we thought were funny, are no longer funny or even amusing sometimes when you watch them.
Yeah, some of it will make you cringe,
Yeah.
Surprisingly, some of it still holds up. I mean, things like Laugh In, um, although I love watching it and I'm entertained by it, it's not funny to a modern audience because it was so of its time. Um, but some comedy for me does hold up. I mean, I've been surprised with, let's say, Laurel and Hardy. I think their stuff holds up really well. Um, WC Fields seems to have fallen off the map,
Yeah.
but he was so cynical and cutting. I think that he's waiting to be rediscovered, quite honestly. Uh, there's so many curmudgeons out there right now. I would think they would just latch on to that character that he usually portrayed. Pardon me.
Jimmy Durante as well.
And even people like Harold Lloyd, nearly all of his career was in the silence. You can still watch those and see things that you still see in comics, and those were those were shot more than 100 years ago, or about 100 years ago in some cases.
And Rodney Dangerfield would be considered offensive today, a lot of his comedy.
Well, he was kind of offensive back in the day too, if you think about it. But that was part of it, I mean,
Uh,
part of his part of his shtick was being kind of messy. Um, and he was always his target, essentially for his comedy. With a few exceptions, it was all self-deprecating stuff. It played well on TV. Yeah, that was You don't see a whole lot of self-deprecating humor now. But that used to be pretty big. You saw Phyllis Diller, was always making fun of her own looks. You know, even though she went out and got all of this plastic surgery to look better, her shtick was still going out and being hacky and making fun of her looks.
So watching these movies or rewatching them, it's like going in a time machine to other times and other values and other perspectives, and again realizing that uh, ways of looking at the world going in and out of fashion as well.
They do, and sometimes an event can completely change, the type of entertainment that you're seeking. I mean, things can change quickly, but I still think that it's worthwhile. If you are an adherent to a particular genre, I do think it's worthwhile to do your due diligence and go back and research this stuff. Go watch the old stuff, but bone up on it. Learn where what you like, learn where the things that you like. Learn where they came from.
Yeah, there's right now belief that a lot of people hold that many of our world leaders are actually shape-shifting lizards that might be or snakes that might be descended from the dinosaurs themselves, and that they lived underground since dinosaur times, and some of them went to outer space, and now they've come back, and that explains a lot of the UFO phenomenon. And we've done a few shows showing how a lot of these stories come from antiquity with snake type beings, but most of them come from popular culture, from television shows and pulp adventures and so on. And that's where most of the lore for these actually came from. So just like with the superheroes being reiterations of the heroes of legend, a lot of our esoteric or strange beliefs are a mishmash of not only what was believed in antiquity by some people, but also what beliefs we form through our popular culture that people have heard, and they might not have taken the central space in their memories, but they're familiar enough with the concepts through products of our imagination where they're willing to believe it as a possibility in our reality as well. And I find that phenomenally fascinating. Like the show V actually is where a lot of the beliefs about the reptilians come from.
Gosh, I hadn't thought about that show forever. What was it, mid 80s, like 83, 84, or something like that? With Mark Singer.
Yes,
Gosh,
Fresh Beastmaster.
yeah, that's right. That is right. Speaking of people who kind of fit the genre of Peplum in a way.
And the sequels to Beastmaster, there were actually two of them. And I think Mark Singer was in both of them. And then the television show that lasted 3 seasons, which he wasn't a part of, although I believe he appeared as a guest star or as another character. Uh,
Mm. But just to wrap up, um, you know, although I'm not sure that we'll, see, very many Peplum films made in the future, their influence can still be felt. I mean, like I said, nearly 70 years later.
Glad,
Even the newest Peplum film is 60 years old, at this point.
Gladiator 2, what do you call it? Troy is coming out with Tom Holland. And
Hmm.
so I believe that Peplum, although not as dominant in our consciousness, is still hanging on there and coming out with products. Some of them are uh, not admirable or memorable, but they're there. And I find that oddly comforting.
No, it is. It is nice to see that. I got to tell you, I don't want this to be another old age rant, but almost everything that I loved as a kid is gone. I mean,
Mm.
and I'm not kidding. Almost everything. The people that I knew back then, they're all gone. Um, the entertainment that I enjoyed, the venues where I sought that entertainment, all of that's gone. The stores that I used to like to shop at, the restaurants that I liked, all gone. So if you can find something that kind of reinforces, something from your past that you enjoyed, hey, go for it. Because that's going to be an experience that you're not going to have very often, unfortunately.
Truer words have not been uttered in a while. Thank you, Brian. Incredibly awesome.
And
And
depressing.
uh, your perspective shifts, and sometimes it's optimistic and sometimes not, but it's always welcome because it points to things that are well worth pondering.
I'm a realistic optimist. So
It's a good thing to be. And how can people find you in the drive-in theater?
visit me at briansdrive-in-theater.com, where you will find a movie of the day every day. Most of the actor pages, as profiled on my website, have their own films, all public domain. So stop by the drive-in, and if you want to interact with me on social media, I'm still only on Facebook, and you can find me if you run a search for Brian Walker or Brian's Drive-In Theater.
And I recommend visiting the drive-in theater. I've been visiting it for over a quarter of a century, and it is still there. It is always being revised and polished and updated. So even though it is still a traditional holy place for those who love B movies, the experience is always new and refreshing. Thank you, Brian, for being the flame keeper for these things. And as always, I greatly enjoyed our conversation and look forward to our next one.
Have a good evening, Hercules.
You too. Say hi to Greg.
I will.